Good evening, everyone. The webinar is about to begin, but before that, there are some general guidelines. All mics should be on mute. Questions by the participants can be typed in the chat box. I now request Professor Thomas P. Zakaria, HOD of Zoology Department, to deliver the welcome speech.
Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir, it's audible.
You're audible, sir.
Okay, I'll read. It's my privilege to welcome you all on behalf of the Rector of St. Joseph's College, Bangalore, Reverend Father Sibert De Silva, SJ, Principal Reverend Dr. Victor Lobo, SJ, to this national webinar on wildlife trafficking and zoonosis. Department of Zoology was established in the year 1957, and the backbone of our department is Natural Science Association. NSA gives a platform for nearly 600 zoology students to exhibit their potentials. This year, Dr. Jayanshankar M. is the coordinator of the Natural Science Association. This academic year, our department collaborated with premier institutions in India. We conducted a conference on pollinators with Indian Science Congress, the Resonance lecture series with Indian Academy of Sciences, biological control of agents seminar with National Bureau of Agricultural Insect Resources, national seminar on wildlife biology with ArrrT India Limited. The credit for arranging this webinar goes to Dr. M. Jayanshankar and our collaborators, ARRT India, Director Reverend Prem Mitra, and the Senior Scientific Officer of ARRT, Mr. Avinash. I welcome and thank them for organizing this webinar. It is my pleasure to welcome the resource person of today's webinar, Ms. Jayanthi Kallam, Executive Director, Avian and Reptilian Rehabilitation Center. Welcome you, madam. Finally, I welcome all the dear participants, colleagues, and the NSA office bearers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I now request Mr. Avinash, Senior Research Officer, ARRT India, who's collaborating with St. Joseph's College, to address the audience. Over to you, sir.
A very good evening to one and all. It's indeed a privilege as part of ARRT India to be a co-host of this series of talks by various resource persons that have very kindly agreed to share their knowledge and expertise in the subjects that have been shared with most of the participants here. And from ARRT, we're glad to extend our support in gathering the resource people for this prestigious national webinar on wildlife trafficking and zoonosis, which is definitely a concern for everyone who are as part of this larger ecosystem that we are all there. And I hope and encourage all the participants to share their views as prescribed by the moderator and indulge in a meaningful discussion so that there is an immense knowledge gaining that happens. And we wish all the speakers a great success for the wonderful work that they're doing as part of the different organizations that they represent. Thank you all, and thank you the Department of Zoology, Dr. Jayanshankar, Dr. Thomas, Mr. SHIVAKUMAR, and the rest of the faculty at St. Joseph's College for this extended collaboration with ARRT India. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I introduce today's speaker, Ms. Jayanthi Kallam.
Anukriti, I will tell about the webinar.
Okay, sir.
Before we start with the presentation, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible. You're audible, sir.
Yeah, a small introduction. to why we planned this webinar. If you have noticed, the emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases have received increasing attention in the last few decades. An estimated 75% of emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic. It could be SARS, Ebola, or the COVID, mainly of viral origin and likely to be vector-borne. The leading causes for their emergence are human behavior and modifications to natural habitats, like expansion of human population, and that. However, other factors also including wildlife trade and translocation, live animal and bushmeat markets, consumption of exotic foods, development of ecotourism, access to petting zoos, and ownership of exotic pets have contributed. So key measures for reducing the dispersion of emerging zoonosis include sustainable agriculture development, proper education of tourists about the risk of outdoor activities, and the control of the live animal trade. It could be exotic pets, wet markets, and bushmeat. And the recent zoonotic pandemics have indicated the need for closer collaboration between the veterinary profession, wildlife specialists, and public health personnel in surveillance, control, and prevention of emerging zoonosis. It is in this regard, the National Science Association of the Department of Zoology, St. Joseph's College, in association with Arusha, India, is organizing this 3-day national webinar on wildlife trafficking and zoonosis. We have experienced resource persons to share their views and educate us. I wish the participants who have joined in from different parts of the country benefit from this webinar. Thank you. Over to Anukriti.
Thank you, sir. I now introduce today's speaker, Ms. Jayanthi Kallam. Ms. Jayanthi Kallam is the Executive Director of Avian, Reptile and Rehabilitation Center. She also serves as a board member of the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council. She worked full-time as a wildlife rehabilitator in the US for 3 years before deciding to move to India in 2015 to serve her home country. She has done courses in ornithology and ecology from Cornell University and Harvard University, USA. She's the only certified wildlife rehabilitator in India, a certification offered by the International Wildlife Rehabilitation Council to highly qualified wildlife rehabilitators all across the world. Jayanthi Kallam also studied veterinary technology and worked at various wildlife rehabilitation organizations and veterinary practices. She's a member of several US and international wildlife rehabilitation organizations. She has participated and presented at several wildlife rehabilitation conferences in the US. Over to you, ma'am.
Hello, everybody. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Let me share the presentation. Okay. Welcome, everyone, for today's topic. This topic is very close to my heart, and also this is one of very relevant topics in the current context. This is about one world, one health. The idea behind it, and we'll dig a little deeper into this, but the main concept behind this is by protecting the environment and the animals within, we protect our own future. We are all interconnected. These are not separate entities. For our own well-being and health, we must protect the animals as well as the environment. This is the topic of the day. And let's see the details here. Okay. So this is the great idea over here. Like if you see the diagram here, there is interrelations and interconnect. Hello? Hello? Okay. There is interconnectivity between the environmental health, the animal health, and the human health. The confluence of all these things is called this concept of one health. One world, one health is the idea that the health and well-being of people is connected to the health and well-being of animals and our shared environment. And when we protect one, we protect all. To say it differently, if we don't protect all of it, we cannot protect one individual entity. So humans are one entity of this whole equation. And if we want to make sure that humans live healthily and, and the standard of living is high for humans, we must make sure the environment as well as the animals within the environment are protected. So that's the idea of this fairly new concept. A little over a decade, this concept has started, One Health concept, which is trying to take the interdisciplinary expertise and come up with solutions that are not just for human health, but that take care of all the other components also. Actually, it's pretty obvious, but we have to talk about this specifically to get more focus and more resources into this. If you think about it, things that affect people affect everything. For example, natural disasters. Recently, there is cyclone Amphan or other cyclones going on. So during cyclones, what happens? The people get affected, definitely the animals get affected, and the environment also gets affected. There would be floods, there would be trees falling, stuff like that. So what affects us? I have listed some things over here. If you think about this, go through and think about this, these things affect everything. Ecological disasters, environmental contaminants. I'm sure most of you have not been born by that time, but Chernobyl is one example. Or even a lot of oil spills that go on. These contaminate the environment. And when the environment gets contaminated, the ecosystems get disturbed. And when that happens, the animals within that ecosystem get affected. And ultimately, these also transfer to human beings in some way or the other. So biodiversity losses, global warming, ozone layer depletions, increased pollution. Again, it's not just humans that get affected with increased pollution. Loss of species. When we go further down, we will see how loss of species really affects human well-being. But that is the key point. Loss of species is not just about like some esoteric value system we are proposing here, but it is when you lose a certain species and that species goes extinct, the ecosystem function that species does vanishes, and when that vanishes, everybody gets affected, including humans. So the whole idea here is to say we are all interdependent and interconnected. Now there are different things that go on with humans, with animals and environment that is affecting this One Health. The recent phenomena that are going on, or population growth, exponential population growth in human beings, and globalization, which increased the mobility and transport, conflicts with wildlife, that's the pressures that humans are facing. On the other side, the pressures animals are facing are like international wildlife trade, wet markets, food demand, farming practices. And the environment pressures, if you see, there are things like urbanization, deforestation, travel and tourism, like it was mentioned before. These are the pressures the environment is facing. The confluence of all these pressures between the humans, between the animals, and between the environment, if we manage this well, that is when we can achieve this One Health, and maintaining this optimal One Health is good for humans, animals, and ultimately the environment. What are the challenges that we face for this One Health? Ideally, we want to achieve this One Health, but there are certain challenges in achieving this One Health. There are things like zoonotic disease, all these, each one is a subject in itself, but we are covering at a very high level today, just to give you all an idea of the different concepts out there. And if you're individually interested, like you can cover any one of these topics, and it's an ocean in itself. So the challenges that One Health that we face to achieve this One Health are like zoonotic diseases, antibiotic resistance, vector-borne diseases, food safety, food security, environmental contamination, chronic diseases, and lack of environmental resilience. Things like that. So we'll just dive a little deeper into each one of these. You have a session coming up for zoonotic diseases where somebody will go deeper into this, but just to give you a very high level view here. What are zoonotic diseases? They are diseases that can spread from animals to humans and vice versa. We often ignore that fact that humans can also give a lot of diseases to animals, not just animals giving to humans. Many different diseases are there like rabies, Nipah, Ebola, etc. And the studies show that recently there is a rise in these zoonotic infections. 60% of emerging infections, the new infections that are coming up globally, are zoonotic in nature. So certainly it is important for us to understand what zoonotic diseases are, how they spread, how do we control them, how do we prepare for them and prevent them. This is a diagram that about Nipah virus. In fact, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, Nipah virus broke out in India too. It broke out in Malaysia and other places before that. But I thought that this is a good example for you to get an idea of what we mean by this interconnectivity. I mean, at how many different levels are we interconnected? Now, Nipah virus, one theory is that it is spread by bats. How does it get spread by bats? The bats which carry these Nipah virus reservoirs, they go and feed on fruits, different fruit. These are fruit-eating bats. So they go to different trees and try to eat the fruits. And when one of the favorite fruit for them is this, they also drink sap. Palm sap is one of their favorites. So they go to this palm tree and take the palm fruit for palm sap. So once they feed that, and this people also harvest palm sap. So if the people go to the same tree where the bats have been and harvest the same palm sap here, that is one way that it can get transmitted. And then that palm sap gets sold to other people. The other ways of transmissions here is bats now can eat fruit, and if you see bats, like sometimes they eat half a fruit and they the other half falls down, or they pass them through their feces. When that happens, farm animals like pigs can eat some of those fruits. And when these pigs eat the fruits, this Nipah virus gets transmitted from the bat to the fruit to the pig. And then when the pigs which are being farmed, once they are infected, we sell pigs as pork. So through the pork, it also gets transmitted to people who consume the pork. And then people move around. They travel around and move to other parts. That is when the same virus can now get transmitted from people to people. And it can even get transmitted to people in other countries or other areas. Sorry, 1 second. Is everything all right?
Yes, madam. Proceed, madam.
Okay. So this is how, in all these different ways, it can start from the bats and it can get into, get out there and even can get transmitted to people who live in other countries, not from the country of origin. In fact, when this Nipah virus has broke out, one of the suspicion was, did it get transmitted, did it come to India through the date palms that we consume? So we never know, because we are all so interconnected, and we are all, and there are many different ways we interact with each other. So this is how these zoonotic diseases spread. So in the case of zoonotic diseases, the animals are getting affected, not just the host animal, but it can pass it to other animals like farm animals. People are getting affected. And when this whole thing, like we have seen with the COVID, when a pandemic kind of a situation breaks out, a lot of other things get affected, like economy gets affected, people get affected, their livelihoods get affected and stuff like that. So that is why it is important for us to understand the nature of these zoonotic diseases and also understand how do we prevent them and also control them once they break out. So quite apart from zoonotic diseases, there are also vector-borne diseases. What are vector-borne diseases? There are these are pathogens. Pathogens get transmitted to hosts like people, animals, and all. They don't get directly transmitted. They need a vector in between to transmit the pathogen into the host. Examples of these are like malaria, Zika, dengue, and other, mostly the tropical diseases that get transmitted through vectors. The common vectors are like flies, mosquitoes, and ticks. In fact, tick-borne diseases are one of the fastest growing diseases that are happening around the world too. But again, to give an example, here I have taken a Zika virus and how it transmits. So with all these different things, the point that I'm trying to emphasize here is how interconnected we are. It's not just about us. What we get, the animals also are getting affected by that, and what they are getting affected by, we are also getting affected by. So here, if you see the Zika virus also gets transmitted through mosquitoes. There are two kind of cycles that happen. There's a jungle cycle where it is transmitting from primates to primates that are in the jungle areas. In the urban areas, again, if the same mosquito that bit a primate comes and bites a human, that's one way it jumps, it comes to the human. But once there is an infected human here, there are other ways that humans can also get infected through sexual contact or through childbirth. Like if somebody is pregnant and is giving birth, it's possible to transmit the Zika virus like that. Blood contamination is another way. And once a person get infected, again, if a mosquito which has not previously bitten any primate over here can bite this person who is infected and can transfer it to the farm animals. And again, the cycle repeats and repeats and repeats itself. So if you see this here, how many different components are there? Again, there are primates, there are other farm animals, there are people who are passing it from each other in different ways. And again, there is an important component here too. People move around. Now it's globally people move around. So when they move around to a new environment, now let's say this person, this lady has taken a flight halfway across the globe. It's possible that, if she's carrying the Zika virus, again, there could be a mosquito that is biting over there. And if the conditions are right, it can start transmission in that new region too. So this is the way that the things are interconnected. Again, the emphasis is on, it's just not a localized thing anymore. It's a globalized thing affecting not just humans anymore, affecting multiple things. And we don't even know what are all the things that get affected sometimes. So vector-borne diseases are a serious concern. What are causing some of these vector-borne diseases? They have always been there, but climate change affects is affecting these disease vectors. How does climate change affect these things? I don't want to go into the detail of everything over here. You can look at this and try and understand. But one point I do want to mention is the temperature. For example, the climate change, the biggest climate change that we are all worried about is global warming and all that. What happens when temperatures warm up? Multiple things happen. One thing, previously, let's say if a certain insect is not suitable for a cold environment or at a higher altitude because it is too cold over there, the temperature is not right. But with global warming, what's happening? Temperatures are rising all over. So now, even in that space where previously an insect could not survive because the temperatures are rising, now it gives an opportunity for that insect, for that vector to move into this new area and develop over there. So that way the insects are also spreading all over and are finding new places suitable for their survival. Another thing that happens is when the temperatures rise, this is more true for the colder climates like the Western Hemisphere. Normally what happens is during the winter months over there, most of these pathogens die and then they re-emerge during the spring and the process repeats. But when the temperatures rise, these some of these insects get one more cycle to breed because the spring and summer months are the suitable temperature months are expanding, so they get one more cycle to breed. That means there is number of their populations are exploding that way. And some of the other ways is also actually higher temperatures are more suitable for faster development to a certain extent. So the maturity that these insects go through the different stages, and the stage that they go to the maturity they will achieve faster. That way also there are more insects that are out there. So I just wanted to take this temperature as one example, but there are other things, the precipitation, changes in relative humidity, and all these things make it ideal for more of the vector carriers, carrying insects, to blossom in newer environments and have more cycles and have more numbers. So this is how, again, from the last two slides, we see how vector-borne diseases affect people, affect livelihoods, affect animals, and climate is at the heart of increasing these incidence of vector carriers. So again, this is a concept that where we are saying all these are related concepts. We cannot just look at one piece of the puzzle. You can never solve the entire puzzle by looking at just one small piece. You have to look at the entire puzzle to come up with effective solutions. Now, granted that at a complexity level as this, it is very difficult to look at the whole picture, because each of this requires years of research for people to understand what is going on, the interlinks and all that. Nonetheless, but that's what we should try and attempt doing, to try and get the whole picture and see how these pieces of puzzle should fit together, again, for our own health and well-being. There is another concept, another one of the problems that the world is facing, a severe problem, is antimicrobial resistance. Even this is also it's a topic close to my heart, even this one. It's a very important thing, global impact of antimicrobial resistance on human health. What happens, but what is antimicrobial resistance? When we get sick, we can get sick because of various things. We can get sick because of bacteria, we can get sick because of viral infection, or we can get sick because of fungals or parasites or protozoans. Different reasons why people get sick. But if you are sick because of a bacterial infection, we have antibacterials that take care of that treat the infection. But just like we are taking a treatment, we are taking a pill or something if we have an infection, while some of the bacteria gets killed by it, it is possible that some bacteria develops a defense mechanism to the medication that we are using, and becomes more powerful. It becomes resistant to that medication. So that is what is called as an antibacterial resistance, or generally antimicrobial resistance. So these microbes are resistant to the known medications that we already have, meaning existing medications will not cure that. So then what happens in existing medications? So that infection, if it starts developing among the population in general, we do not have the medications ready for it. None of the existing medication works. So that causes a lot of mortality, particularly with people with comorbidities, like people who are going through cancer and other things. So this is the problem with antimicrobial resistance in general. This is a serious concern, like some figures that I have for you here. Around 700,000 deaths per year globally. Newborns also with some infections, which is difficult for them to fight on their own. They need antibacterials, antimicrobes, or antibacterial drugs. But what if the bacteria that they have, which they got from the hospital, is already resistant to that? The medication is not going to work anymore. So these are serious concerns with this bacterial resistance or antimicrobial resistance. But how does this antibiotic resistance spreads? Even this is very, very interconnected. It's a huge topic in itself. Like if you take farm animals, I don't know how many of you know, farm animals get fed, a lot of times they actually feed antibacterials just to make sure that their stock is healthy. Now these are not prescribed, these are not specifically looked at each animal and prescribed for that group of animals. These are some general farmers know, oh, okay, you don't want to get diarrhea, then just use this antibiotic or something like that. The other industry where a lot of excessive antibacterials get used is fish farming. People who have these fish ponds and all that, the same thing again, to make sure that their stock is healthy, they'll just give them low doses of antibacterials, and these low doses of antibacteria will not be able to kill all the bacteria, or the bacteria will keep evolving that this low dose of antibacterial cannot take care of anymore. So then what happens? When we feed these animals these antibacterials, they are going to excrete some of these things. And when they excrete these things, these bacteria, some of it goes into the environment. And some of it will be in their bodies, remain in their bodies. When we eat those, and so some of the manure that is from these animals is used for our plants. So some of these bacteria also finds its way into the soil and into our food. So when we eat this food and when we eat this meat, we are also consuming some of this bacteria. Again, that bacteria, if it has an ideal environment in our own gut system, in our own stomachs, it starts developing. So that is one way from the farm animals and the plants that you can get this bacteria, and none of the existing drugs work because this new bacteria is resistant to the existing drugs. The other ways in which this also can develop is somebody is sick, they go to the hospital. When they go to the hospital, there are new kinds of resistant bacteria that are going on over there. So this person may go for one reason, but in the process may acquire this bacteria that is generally present in the hospital environment. And when they go home and when they go to other places, it is possible that they can spread these in the general community. So and in fact, if you have pets, sometimes you can pass some of these to your pets also, or farm animals. Again, what it is trying to illustrate here is the antibiotic resistance it's not just limited to the human beings. Some of the same antibiotics are used in farm animals also, or wildlife also, and together we may all be contributing to this evolution of new types of bacteria that is resistant to existing drugs.
Juice.
Are we okay? Can we move on? Hello?
Yes, madam, please move on.
Okay. So the other thing is vaccines. I mean, currently everybody is talking about COVID-19, or when is the vaccination coming up? I mean, vaccination is the only solution for this stopping the spread of this global pandemic. But if you think about it, vaccines are not silver bullets. Because not all infectious agents can be grown in a culture medium, and also doing so is difficult and expensive and also time consuming. There are multiple phases of vaccine development, from exploratory to quality control, before it can be put into the market and made it available for people. And it takes a finite amount of time. So when a new kind of virus or a new kind of bacteria shows up, developing a vaccine takes some time. And you cannot create a multi-strain vaccine. Even if you do have a vaccination, it applies to that specific strain of virus. If that virus mutates a little bit and develops into a new strain, the old vaccine doesn't work anymore. And the viruses and bacteria are continuously evolving, creating defense mechanisms to counter the vaccinations that we have too. So while we can say that, oh, okay, we can take care of this problem by investing more into our science and research and other things, by developing vaccines quickly, it always takes a certain amount of time to develop these vaccines. And in a pandemic situation like now, that it may be too late, too many lives may be lost before this vaccine is developed. And also where they have, in emergency kind of situations, vaccines create new problems in itself. Where do you store them? Are they available to all sections of the society because of the expenses associated with it? Usually they get limited to the developed and probably developing countries to some extent, but the other countries may not be able to access them when the demand is so high. So these are all the other issues that even vaccine is associated with vaccinations. So again, the point of what we are trying to illustrate over here is science alone cannot take care of the problems in a timely manner. I mean, obviously it's important, and we are always trying to get ahead of the problem. Or when the problem happens, we're trying to take care of it. But without looking again at the holistic picture, we may not have these silver bullets to take care of the problems. So then that's about antimicrobial resistance and vaccinations. There's another problem.
Madam, just a second. I am moderator here, Professor SHIVAKUMAR here. I would like to tell something to the participants.
Sure.
Can I?
Sure. Please, go ahead.
Dear participants, there is a technical glitch in posting your questions in chat box. So I would like you to note down your questions in a piece of paper, and at the end in the Q&A session, you can unmute yourself one by one and ask a question. Immediately after asking the question in the Q&A, you can please mute yourself so that Madam will answer your questions. I hope you can just follow my instructions. Please note down your questions, and then in the Q&A session, you can just ask Madam the concerned question, because there is a technical glitch in the chat box of the current platform. Thank you. Madam, please continue.
Sure. So the other thing that concerns all of us is food security. I mean, a lot. What's food security? All people who are living on this planet need access to good quality food. There are so many small farmers who have small land holdings where they grow their crops and stuff like that. And if their crops get damaged, their livelihoods get affected. So these are all the concerned issues with the food security. Even in the case of food security, everybody must have heard the recent locust invasion, and it's now happening even in India too. But these are also, there is a environmental aspect to it. There is a climate change aspect to this. The current phase, it's called Indian Ocean. It's an Indian Ocean dipole. We are in the positive phase where the water will be cooler on the eastern side and warmer on the western side of the Indian Ocean. If you all remember, some 6 months ago, 3-4 months ago, I think, there were severe forest fires in Australia. So because of the drought there. So the Australian forest fires and the current locust invasion is happening, is to some extent responsible is this Indian Ocean dipole situation that we are currently in. While this is not a new concept, it keeps happening every 3-4 years, but the higher temperatures that we are experiencing now has pushed the threshold a little bit higher, and all of these things have been exaggerated than the normal situation. So that is what we have. So how do these kind of climatic change events affect our food security? Many different ways. One example I have given is the locusts, and it could be other insects also, but there are other ways in which it affects, like warmer temperatures make it difficult to keep food stored for longer periods. Also, again, we talked about this, higher temperatures will make pathogen load high. The pathogens that can impact the food will get that much more time because of the higher temperature. So there are many different ways in which this climate change affects even something like our food security. So for example, what is our response for the locust infestation that's going on? What are we doing? We take all these different types of the chemicals and go in small planes and spray these over huge areas of land. And when we spray this, it's very difficult to say we are spraying only in a small agricultural land. Next to the agriculture, if there is a lake or if there is a small patch of forest, it gets sprayed all over. Then what happens because of that? Like these pesticides will remain in the environment. They are not only, the pesticides not only kill the intended insect, the locusts over here, but they also kill the other insects. And there are birds that eat these things. And these the same pesticide residuals find themselves into the birds too. Not only that, handling the disposing of all these chemicals properly, disposing of all the cans, and making sure that all the personnel who are using these things are safe. These are all the risks that are associated with a reactive measure like what we keep doing. In this case, yes, while we are trying to take care of the problem, we are not that ahead of the problem, but still we are trying to take care of it. But there are problems with our mitigation strategies also. Again, it comes back to prevention is better, and how do we prevent all these things? By understanding that we are all interrelated, and trying to invest more into understanding those things, and coming up with techniques that will take care of the problem before it explodes, like in this case. Another aspect that affects to us, affects all of us, is the food safety. There are again a lot of foodborne illnesses that happen increasingly. One example is salmonella, is one of those foodborne diseases. So, okay, if you think about it, today, if you have a salad somewhere, or if you have a burrito, for example, these ingredients from the burritos are coming from various different places. The olives could come from Greece, and jalapenos could be coming from Mexico, and different places. I mean, because of the globalization, the movement of goods is become so easy that these the things that we eat are coming from so many different places. And the safety measures that are taken care in all these different places. So if you eat a salad and it is coming from 15 different places, and it gets processed, transported, and it gets processed at one place, and then it gets delivered to your restaurant where you are eating, the safety, how well the safety is maintained in all these places ultimately affects the safety of the salad or the food that you're eating. So this is also another way where the people and animal interactions come into picture. A lot of farms have farm animals, and a lot of farms are in open areas, obviously, right? And there will be a lot of birds around, wild birds and other wild animals interacting with this, coming and going into the farm. So salmonella is a bacterial infection that can be passed through the feces and other things, and it can remain in the soil, it can be on the plants. So if there are these interactions that are happening on 6 different farms or 10 different farms from 5 different countries, what happens over there will ultimately affect what you're eating. Just think about that. That is how interconnected we are. We are interconnected to people, farmers in other countries, halfway across the world, and the farm animals and the wildlife that passes through those farmlands. So that is how interconnected we are, and that affects the food that we eat. So we talked about, I mean, these are not all of the problems, but I wanted to at a high level give some problems. Just to summarize, the One World, One Health, I mean, we want to achieve this One Health for all these, all the people and animals and the ecosystems. But what are the problems this One Health in achieving this One Health? There are growing number of zoonotic diseases. We talked about it. Increasing human-animal conflict, exotic wildlife trade. Again, the problem with exotic wildlife trade is animals that don't belong in a certain ecosystem are being transported to that ecosystem. Even if you say that that animal will be kept in a house, again, that animal can interact with other pet animal, can interact with other animal that is outside, a free living wild animal in that environment. So that is how these pathogens or the bacteria or viruses can get transmitted through this exotic wildlife trade. Intense factory farming is another one. When we do this intense factory farming methods, the pressure to meet the bottom line is so high that it's very difficult for these small scale farmers or even large scale ones to make sure that the health checks are done well and the sanitization is standards are maintained. So these are some of the problems of health. At the ecosystem level, there are problems like deforestation, heavy use of pesticides and agrochemicals, climate change, burning grasslands, and changes in land use, which is resulting in habitat loss. Anyway, those are the problems, but there are also potential solutions. Don't want to leave you with just all the problems. Of course, we are living in these current times with a certain set of problems. People before us lived with a different set of problems, and people in future will also live with problems. But what humans are good at, and that's the hope, is solving their problems. Only if we focus in the right direction. So what are some of these potential solutions? For zoonotic diseases, it is an interdisciplinary approach where veterinary doctors, public health professionals, policy makers, and human doctors can interact with each other and identify if there is a I'll give a small example. If, let us say, suddenly all the chicken are dying in a small farm located in some village, what usually happens? Nobody talks about it, because if they talk about it, their farm will be shut down. That is the current state. But what if there is a new zoonotic disease outbreak that happens in that farm? Right? So, and where should they go? What are the compensation measures if it is a zoonotic? So these are all interconnected, interrelated issues. So only when we can collaborate and make this as an important initiative amongst all of us, it's possible to come up with some solutions. And there are other ways like banning wildlife trade and increasing monitoring and enforcement is one. Another thing is, at the ecosystem level, we should try and minimize large-scale deforestation of old growth forests. And another important point here, even the afforestation, when people plant trees and all that, usually they are commercially valuable trees, or they are just monocultures, the things that grow fast, stuff like that. But afforestation really means, like, maintaining a biodiversity, a diverse, different types of trees, like that. So it's important to ensure that even our afforestation measures are done correctly. So there are some solutions. So let's not spend too much time on this. We'll move on. So what does it entail? How can we come up with these One Health solutions that ensure people, animal, and ecosystems and environment are all healthy? Important things: collaborating, communicating, and coordinating. And who should collaborate, communicate, and coordinate? Agriculture farmers, workers, poultry farmers, veterinarians, pet owners, healthcare workers, policymakers, ecologists, important scientists, laboratory workers, like all these people should come together, and working together is the key to One Health. And we have to develop systems to do that. So while we have seen all these things about how important and how interconnected we are, one of the things we do is, trying to illustrate it in a poster over here. The globe, the planet the planet is surviving because of the ecosystem services a lot of other components of our ecosystem other than humans provide. For example, the air, we depend on air, water, soil, we depend on different microbes, plants, grasslands, mangroves, everything has a function in it. And when we disturb this balance, these are Zingo blocks, by the way, like when you start taking off the pieces, some of the pieces from this block, the entire block becomes unstable. Like already last year, we lost about 11.9 million hectares of tree cover in 2019 alone. I mean, that's a block that came off. So many species are extinct over the last 25 years. Another block that came off. What is happening when all these blocks are coming off? The entire tower in which this whole planet and on which we are dependent on is becoming a little shaky. And when it becomes shaky, who ultimately pays the price? We humans. So we should not be in a haste to try and remove, or we should be very careful before before our actions impact on the things. So that's the idea to communicate over here. Biodiversity is extremely important, and our actions today are impacting this biodiversity. And when that gets impacted, the resilience of our environment or ecosystems gets shaken, gets weaker. And when that gets weaker, ultimately our health, our livelihoods will get impacted. So what's the conclusion? What we have here? I hope through these different concepts we illustrated that a safer environment which promotes healthy animals ultimately promotes healthy humans. So if we want to live healthy, and if we want to live long, and we want to improve our quality of life on this planet Earth, it is on us to make sure that we promote a safe environment around us, clean environment, and also ensure that the animals and the wildlife, farm animals, pet animals in this environment are safe too. So during the current context, I hope this is pertinent again. It's an unprecedented time that we are in right now. Many lives are lost, livelihoods are lost. So we are at a crossroads. So what do we do going forward? There are two types of development, an egocentric development and an ecocentric development. An egocentric development is where we continue with business as usual, our GDPs and other things, and continue with the same unsustainable practices with short-term focus, climate change, have more projects which cut through our forest corridors, continue with our emissions and pollution. Or there is another way to do it too. It could be an ecocentric, where understanding that man is just but a small part of this whole equation, and the whole equation has to be strong and strengthened so that the human, which is part of that equation, will also stay strong in the long run. So that is the idea, and that is the way forward, which will promote again this concept of health of everything, and within that lies the health of humans too. So that's the end of the presentation.
This is hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask some
Kumar.
questions?
Just a second, please. Yeah, I would like to thank Ms. Jayanthi Kallam for her quite an interesting presentation on One World, One Health, because she has covered up most of the topics in brief. But even then, she has made an interesting presentation for the day. Madam, thank you for actually educating most of the participants here to say that man is such a small percentage of part of the ecosystem, and we would like to have balance between the ecosystem and the human beings. So I would like to now take some questions which are posted on the YouTube as well as the Instagram handle. But first, before that, I would like to ask participants one by one. You can unmute yourselves, but don't overlap, and you can ask your questions. Yes, please. You can start now.
Can I?
Excuse me, can I stop sharing this so that I can see the participants? I'm not seeing the participants right now.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you can stop sharing this.
I'm not able to do so. Oh, okay, got it. All right, cool.
Can I?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, please go on. Go ahead.
Hello, namaste everyone.
Please introduce yourself.
This is only a type of suggestion. Instead of eco-friendly type.
Please introduce.
Hello?
Introduce
I'm
yourself.
Kiran Nagan, associate professor. My suggestion is, instead of go through with antibiotics or any other medication or something, instead that we should go through with the type of infection. I mean, how these pathogens that are passively enter in our cell, in our body. If we can control that one, then we cannot have any disease, isn't it? Let we think like that. Then how these pathogens are passively enter? Are there any particles that are present on the surface of the plasmas or cells of our surfaces of our cells, and like that of some of the materials that are, chemicals that are present on the plasma membrane which accept these pathogens inside. If we can control that, then we can prevent all the diseases, and by that we can continue healthy, isn't it?
Okay. So it's like it's not. Thought is appreciated, but it's not as simple as that. Also, right? Like because it's true. Prevention is important. Like for example, we all have to improve our sanitization practices, the food safety. Like we talked about, it doesn't directly transmit. It transmits directly in some cases. It transmits through a vector in some cases. It transmits through the food we eat in some cases, and in some cases it also transmits through things like blood transfusions and other things. But the point is, like, these are the microbes that we are talking about, are so many of them. I mean, it's not even like we even know a lot of them. Like for example, with the warmer climate, that permafrost that is going to melt, there are so many more microbes that are going to be released that are frozen underneath it. So the viruses are also not they're not static number of these things. There are newer and newer things that are coming as we go more deeper into the forest or deeper into areas that have been unexplored before, like caves, mines, and other things. We are coming in interaction with more of these things. So we cannot stop that. When we live, we are interacting with the world, and we will to some extent come in contact with these things which get transmitted in so many different ways. But having said that, yes, a general population, let us say if you have a population which is making sure that, you know, in their homes or in their workplaces, proper sanitization practices, if they are into food industry, making sure the safety standards that are followed are highest, or in accordance to strictly in accordance to what is prescribed, and at an individual level and at other hospitals and other things, if these are done well, definitely it will control to some extent this. It will break the chain. We keep saying break the chain. Yes, it will break the chain. The more number of people that are exposed to this, the higher chance for these things to develop further, to evolve. So if we break it, if we keep this into small containments, it does not spread that fast, or it doesn't evolve that faster. So that's.
Ma'am, can I add a note on that?
Sure.
Since it's very high with respect to this viruses and bacteria, it's not very easy to find out the root. And as we speak, the scientific community thinking of getting in, it's not easy to have a specific markers since the mutation rate is very high. So we will have to think of other ways also of prevention rather than thinking only on this part, possibly.
Agreed.
Madam, there is one comment on YouTube by Miss Parul Banerjee. She states that antibiotic resistance for the microbes are also an evolutionary force for them to survive and expand their population. What is your comment on it?
Yeah, we are evolving, they are evolving. Hopefully in this fight of evolving, we will stay one step ahead of these microbes. I mean, that is the idea. We want to preserve. I mean, no matter what, yes, everything belongs in the nature and all that. We want to, as a species itself, we are interested in our survival. We want to make sure that we live healthy, we live long. And also our systems that we are dependent on, our livelihoods are not impacted. It is true that the bacteria are evolving and they will continue to evolve. There is no way to stop them from evolving. Either it is bacteria or virus or other things, they will evolve. You come up with a treatment, you come up with a vaccine, they will come up with a different defense mechanism. Things like, they will even interact, they will pass on to the next generation some information. All this evolution is happening in them. So that is why it is important to respect that. Not just say, we got it covered. We have to respect what we know and what we don't know. Like somebody just pointed out, we don't know enough about these things. We don't know enough about these transmission routes, markers, all this. So while it is important for us to know, but while trying to know and stay a step ahead of these things, it is important to take everything into consideration, the holistic picture. That's the idea.
This is another question on YouTube itself. Why is trade of exotic species allowed within there is a known threat of invasiveness and spread of such diseases?
Very good question. Why is a question. There are many reasons actually.
This is from Aditi Lakkad.
Okay, there are many reasons. For example, some of these when we say exotic trade, don't just think about they get taken from one place to the other place and all that, like, across the globe. So why? A lot of times there are some legal reasons, there are some acceptable reasons that people give why this trade happens. One is for research, for example. We want to do research on certain things, and they are also sometimes there are not so above board reasons, I would say, like consumption of meat, and the people a lot of times keep these things for pleasure. Now, this is the key, there are some, as we all, even this is a question that baffles me here too. Even here, a lot of people have these exotic birds and exotic reptiles and stuff like that. That became a hobby now. And even though some of these species, the trade is banned, there are, tomorrow you will know more about this. So it's not, I don't want to go into much detail because Jose is an expert on that and he will cover some of this. But yeah, so even though the diseases do get transmitted, the pressure for the reasons like research and all trump sometimes. And sometimes, even though it is not legal, people find ways to get what they want. Because of lack of monitoring and lack of effective implementation of these laws, there are these animals that find their ways into the other to get these things. So that is why the exotic trade is rampant, both for legal reasons some cases, and some cases there are reasons like people just there is demand for it.
Another question from Kiran Sai on YouTube itself. Sorry, it's from Maria Anjum. It is seen that economic development and environment are inversely proportional. What can we do about it?
No, that's it seems, maybe that's the right word. It seems that economic development and environment are inversely proportional. Why does it seem so? It seems because the commons are not valued, meaning whenever you do a project, right? I mean, we do this at home also. I want to invest in a new project, in a new business. You look at all your costs and all your benefits and you value, okay, my benefits are more than the cost, so then this project is worth it. But what happens in case of, in the current modeling systems that we have, prevalent economic models that we have, first of all, we do not have good models to value ecosystem services. How do you value a pollinator's existence in an environment? We don't have proper systems to evaluate them. How do you value a wildlife corridor, the use of the wildlife corridor? Who are all the stakeholders of? How do you assign a value? Because there is no easy way to assign value to that. So that is one reason. And the other reason is also the models are not up to date, and sometimes we don't know the knowledge that we have about these ecosystems and environments services is very limited. We are only trying to understand the importance of this and trying to know more and more. So these models are starting to develop. Our understanding is going to increase, and when that increases, then when we decide, is this project worthwhile? is this project like, putting through a railway track or train in some place, or whatever the case may be, is it worthwhile? When we do that, we have to make sure that we value. So far, we do not value these ecosystem services in that. We only value how much cost is it going to be, construction material, how many people are going to get benefited. And that is the value system. And it looks like that, yeah, when it is a zero value is given to all these ecosystem services, the equation will go on terms of exploit the environment, get your development going. But when you learn how to appropriately value all these ecosystem services, which may take 300 years from now, I don't know, but we are starting to do this. But when we learn how to appropriately value, then the equation gets balanced. And then I do not agree with this thing that they're inversely proportional to each other. It seems so because we don't know enough about this, and we don't have our models updated to correctly evaluate these things.
Yeah, now any of the participants on the teams, do you have any questions? You can please ask one by one.
Hello. Ma'am, I have a question.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah,
please introduce yourself and just ask the question, please.
Hello, I'm Apurva Sandhya. I'm a student. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a question that bacteria and pathogens, they can survive better if they can live, in a passive, in a symbiotic association with its host, or even in a commensalism, right?
Yeah.
So isn't that, in case of COVID, is it possible that could happen, or with any other?
I mean, actually, there is, we exist because of the bacteria in our guts. I hope everybody knows that. There is, the bacteria in our guts is what is enabling us to function, in fact, and that's the case with a lot of other animals too. So there are certain bacteria with which we have symbiotic relationship. They're good things that make this world function too. So bacteria, it's not all bad. But there are certain things that are not good for our health. Now, I'm not an expert on COVID in terms of the details like that, but from what I understand, this is something. It's possible that enough people, once they get infected, it spreads around in the population. After it reaches a certain level, there is a herd immunity that it is not going to be as fatal as it is now. That's a possibility. But by the time that happens, in a year or so, a new strain may come, which again may go through the same cycle. So that is how these things work. So yeah, in some cases, yes, we do have symbiotic relationships, and that is a good thing. But not everything falls in the same category. Did that answer your question, Apurva?
Yes, thank you.
Another question from YouTube. Ma'am, do you think man and wildlife conflict is a major cause for these kind of pathogens?
Yeah, conflict is different kinds. Definitely. I want to share something that happened just this with us. We run a wildlife rehabilitation facility. Somebody in Vidyaranyapura, if you're in Bangalore, they had a false ceiling in their house. So, and there is some gap in there. So they closed the gap. That morning. You know what happened? By evening, there were about 30 bats in their bedroom, because the entrance way is closed outside the false ceiling, because the bats are roosting in the false ceiling here. Suddenly, because that is closed, they found a way into that is the only exit way. They have to go out for the night. So they entered into the house. So this is a conflict situation, right? I mean, it's nobody's fault here, technically speaking. I mean, the person wanted to do something to his house. Suddenly, the conflict. And what happened to those bats? If you think about it, they were going helter-skelter everywhere, into the clothes, into here, into there. So what is the result of this? This results in a situation where and I'm saying a very local example over here, where that bat population is stressed. If that bat population gets stressed, and if anything is an immunocompromised bat in that, through that stress, it becomes more likely to host pathogens. So, and we are interacting with them. I mean, and this is only an example that is relevant because it happened recently. I wanted to share, but in that sense, there are many ways where we are coming into conflict with the wildlife. And when we come into conflict with wildlife, what do? We burst crackers, we chase them out, we sometimes we can take a stick, we smoke them out, we do all these things. When we do all this, what is happening? So when we understand this thing that we are interlinked, we will know that when we do this to a population, that population is stressed and it will get immunocompromised, and as such will become a likely reservoir to pathogens. And once some of them get those pathogens, they will transfer to other groups. And in some way or the other, it is possible that those things find their way back into to us. So definitely, when a small scale or a large scale human-animal wildlife, human-wildlife conflict, definitely is a contributor to increased zoonotic risk.
Any participants on the teams now live? Anybody has a question?
Hello. Hello, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can I speak?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm Aditi Panse.
As you spoke about this food security and food safety.
Kavya, 1 second. Kavya, just 1 second.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Let Aditi finish her question. Aditi, go ahead.
Sure,
yeah,
sir.
thank you, sir. Hello, I'm Aditi Panse. I had a query, ma'am, that weren't these zoonotic diseases prevalent in the older times, or are they known today more because of the research and stuff? And if they were prevalent, and if they are more prevalent today, like what are the reasons, major reasons that they have come there? Because in the older days also, people might be eating other animals. So, what is the basic reason today that they are so prevalent?
Correct. Very good question again. Yes, they were always there. This is not a new phenomenon at all. At all. I mean, the zoonotic diseases were always around. And whenever it started, when we started interacting and we started farming, keeping farm animals, when we started keeping farm animals, then our interaction with them increased. Like, when it was only during the hunting gatherer time, that's a different. Your interaction is like, very brief period. You just go, you kill the animal and you consume it. But like once we started keeping farm animals, we got them closer to our living spaces. The likelihood of transmission happens and all that. And even so, even 100 years ago also, there were these zoonotic outbreaks happening all the time. But what happened now? Why are we concerned more about it now? Because the standards, first and foremost, the standards of life have improved. It's not acceptable anymore that few hundred people will die in this tribe, or in this country, few thousand people will die. No, I mean the human standard of life has been improving. Our definition of a country that is developing, it means that accessible healthcare to everyone and everyone staying healthy. That is one reason, but there are many reasons. Like that is one. But the other reasons are also that before, when they were breaking, we were not moving around. Our own mobility, we are not interacting. We are living in small communities. So even if there is an outbreak that happened, probably it would run its course and it would die off. But now, if one person got infected, the likelihood, I mean, I don't know the number, how close we are, each person, how many different people we interact with as a course of our day-to-day life. So these pathogens are also getting more. They're getting these linked. They're not the breaking the chain is not happening. We are establishing more and more chains and in different places and stuff like that. That is another. Also, like you said, the media, the availability of information that is passing. If a disease outbreaks in remote part of China, maybe 100 years ago, nobody would have known about it in India. But now we about it. And now we think about it because we know that if it breaks up in China or it somewhere else, I mean, it doesn't that it finds its way to us. So we are talking more about it because we, as our definition of quality of life is increasing, we want to make sure not just it's not anymore survival of the fittest. We want to make sure that health is accessible and everyone stays healthy, even the guys who are even the population which is immunocompromised or population which does not have enough which does not have access to enough nutritional food and all that. So in this case it becomes a more important and relevant problem now. That answers your question.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Kavya, go ahead. Kavya?
Okay, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, yes. Go ahead.
Okay, okay. Hello, ma'am. This is Kavya from St. Joseph's College, the assistant professor. Thank you for this eye-opening talk. Anyways, my question is that to ensure the food safety for the present population globally, the situation is inevitable that we are going with this pesticides or all these things because it is inevitable situation that we'll have to feed the population. And this is one of the reasons for the present multi-drug resistance or whatever we are speaking about. And that is causing a very big problem of for the scientific community to come up with new drugs where we are fighting against this multiple drug resistance. So what do you comment on this and what do you, what kind of solution or suggestions that you put forth?
Yeah, again, a good point that you have raised, Ms. Kavya. So the thing is, it's true. I mean, we have challenges. I mean, we have a challenge of feeding the entire globe, and we are growing. We're 7 billion, and we are growing more. So in some ways, we cannot look at these problems in an isolated manner. We cannot, population is a contributor. Income inequalities, it goes into even those things. Income inequalities is a problem. Security, like if a farmer loses a crop, what is the security that farmer has? Now, if you don't have security for the farmer, is he okay to lose the crop or is he going to use anything and everything that is accessible?
Okay.
So that he gets a proper yield. So these things again. Now we're not talking about one health where with other animals or something. Within even our own human communities, the way we are organizing ourselves, the way we are growing, and all these issues are also making the food security problem is getting exaggerated because of that. I'm not saying that we should not use pesticides. I cannot say that. I mean, it will not be fair for me to say don't use pesticides. By saying that, who is getting affected? It is the farmers who are getting affected. It is people who want access to cheap food because they don't have income to buy if food is suddenly expensive. Yeah, so those are getting affected. So that's not, I'm not proposing that. But what I'm saying is that we do have to take a look at all these things. Take a look at even what development means to us, what development means to a predominantly agricultural based country that has only in the recent times seen this revolution or seen this, this development wave. What does it mean? Are we going at the right pace? Is this right for us? I don't have answers. I mean, but definitely this is something that we should be looking at. It will be more prudent if we connect all these things and look at.
Possibly we'll need to come with some regulations and some limitations.
Sure.
So yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. It was a wonderful talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam, in continuation with Dr. Kavya's question, Varsha Singh on YouTube also has posted, can we replace organic farming as an alternative for these kind of pesticide use and antibiotic drug resistance and pathogens?
Okay. In my past life, like before I got into wildlife and all that, I actually tried being an organic farmer. The first thing after my corporate job, I went into organic farming, thinking that, sustainable lives and so organic is the way to go. But it has a lot of problems. Organic. So while in theory it is definitely a good thing. If we all can move into it, it's great. But it is not feasible in the current times when with all these other issues that we are talking about, we have small farmers, we do not have securities for farming. Families are entirely dependent on, they have already many other uncertainties in terms of seasonal variations and rainfalls and other things, price fluctuations. On top of it, if you also add, like, changing it to organic. I mean, in some ways, if you want to change to organic, you should be able to take that 3-4 years of converting your land into a new way of farming. I mean, who can afford that? How many of us can afford that? What happens to the food production during that time? So while it is good to push towards organic farming, and we should find ways, even if not completely organic farming, how to minimize the pesticides, how to only use as required and in the right time that we use it. So that happens in the farming is also a very complex thing that happens. If you use them if you de-weed in the right time, for example, if you take out the weeds in the right time, or if you use the pesticides in the right time, you don't need to use so much of it. So these are the revolutions that can start happening before we talk about, we can all switch to organic farming.
Another question, madam, on YouTube from Suraj Goswami. Tribal community are more closer to wildlife ecosystem, but they can't be affected by these pathogens. Any comments?
Unfortunately, they are affected by these pathogens, and that's the tragedy of it, actually. I'm sure you all know, one thing is, when explorers go into tribal communities, sometimes the tribal communities get vanished because they don't even have resistance for something like common cold. I mean, this is in the past. Even something like as a common cold that we all get, if you go into a new community that has been isolated itself from the mainstream, really remote place, the population over there will not have immunity for a common cold that you and I have. There are many tribal communities that have been affected because of the explorers just going in and randomly mingling. But today, again, we are all interconnected. A lot of tribal communities, how many of them are really living just from the forest products? Not many. A lot of them are living because of the subsidizing that we give them, or that they do interact, they work as, in construction fields and in another field. So by we taking these diseases to these, we are taking, I mean, there is absolutely no doubt about that, all these diseases that we go through in one way or the other, we are taking them to these tribal communities, and it's a disservice in that sense to them. But that is why it is important for us to, if all of us understand these virus ecologies and what impact do these things really have, maybe we will exercise a certain discipline and make sure that this doesn't happen. But they are getting affected because of this.
Participants, any other questions you would like to ask, ma'am? Please unmute yourself and ask the questions.
Good evening, ma'am. Hello.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. Go ahead. Introduce yourself and ask your question.
Good evening, ma'am. Shivakumar this side from Bhaisa University. I would like to know that if we cut down on animal products from our lifestyle and switch to a plant-based options, then will it help in reducing the antibiotic resistance?
Maybe to some extent, but I also want to point out that antibiotic resistance is not just from animals alone. Antibiotic resistance also happens even from other places. That's not the only source. To some extent, maybe we can cut down. But again, this is also a complex question because our dependence on animal products. I mean, we don't have an easy solution to transfer from animal products to completely plant-based products yet. I mean, it's not, again, in in theory, yeah, it is possible. Greenhouse emissions will be less, and which contributes to global warming and all that. But again, we are talking about a lot of cultures and a lot people's diet preferences and all that, and that change is not um, something very simple to do. But in theory, yeah, if we reduce the dependence on animal-based products, it's yeah, it will reduce this some of these pathogen transmission. In theory, it is yes, but I will just say that much and say I would stop short of proposing that as a solution because there are some intricate and complex issues associated.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody
Hello,
else?
Hello, ma'am. This is Tejaswini from RV College. Ma'am, from where do we start the awareness about the food safety? Because already we are dealing with adulterants and, and coming to this infectious vectors or maybe the bacteria or virus related, from where do we start the awareness for the community or maybe the farmers or whatever?
Yeah, actually, yeah, increased awareness and at local level. Like actually, WHO provides some of the guidelines to make sure what can you do to ensure food safety. For like a simple thing like keep your meat separate from vegetables. Or how do you store them? How do you prepare things? And at what temperature do you have to heat? There are guidelines that are given, but this information, how does it get disseminated into all these local communities? One, more and more people again hopefully take this as a serious thing and start local awareness programs in regional languages where they are part of the communities. Then it becomes easier to spread this message, and changes will always be slow. I mean, suddenly we're not going to get into this in a year or two. But if we start talking about this, definitely right now there are more people who are doing that hand sanitization process than before. Not only when we are in the midst of pandemics or a breakdown of something, but there are as a general way of life. I mean, this should become a part of life, a way of life, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our family, taking care of animals around us or the ecosystems around us. And what are the simple things that we can do to ensure that this information has to be just communicated in by more people in local languages. Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, but until then, I think we are at the receiving end because.
Yeah, I mean, while I say all these things, actually things are not that bad. I mean, see, these things break out once, and we are also resilient. I mean, we don't want to say it's all like, oh, all downhill and all that. No, let's not think of it like that. Our ecosystems, our environment, with the animals, we are also very resilient. Okay, so. We have to build that strength from what we have, that resilience. Yes, this is a huge setback in a way, but humans have always come on the top through a lot of setbacks too. And that's why we are even having this kind of conversation. Would we have had this kind of conversation 1 year ago? We probably won't. I mean, we probably would not put some presentation together like this. But now we are talking more about it. Our attention is going towards it, and humans are good at finding solutions for things that they focus on. They have to identify that as a problem. It's getting slow at identifying that as a problem. Solutions will come, may not be as fast as we would like, but certainly they would come. So that's the hope that I want to hold on to, and I want to encourage you youngsters also to hold on to that. You are the future. I mean, it is great that you are having a session like this, and believe me, I tried to think about what is that I really want to say to this community, because I took it as a responsibility on my end to be able to get some of this information to you guys, so you will be inspired by this. You will be that you will go on your own and start doing researches and choose careers in some of these fields, because these related fields are going to be more important in the future. So yeah, let's hold on to that hope that we can overcome these problems, and you guys are the vehicles for that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. It was a wonderful session. Thank you.
Any other participants, please? Any other questions?
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah. Please.
Yes, sir. This is
Introduce
Matthew
yourself.
from Rice University. Okay. When looking at the severity of the problem that we are facing, or the solution that requires, right? It needs to have a maybe socio-economic, political, cultural, religious, or whatnot, right? All those kinds of perspective, right? We do need to address this particular problem. And most of the time, I mean, I'm wondering whether we will be able to have a solution, because most of the time we are unable to come up with a solution for problems like this if there is no common enemy. Only when we do have some common enemy, we are coming out of the differences that we do have and we face these problems, right? Otherwise, it seems very difficult to face the challenges that we do have in our hand, because we do have all those differences, socio-economic, cultural, political, religious, and whatnot as a human being.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I mean, and that's the complex structure that we are living in. Why it is difficult to come up with a solution is that there are these things. There are the socio-political, economic, all these factors that you have, religious factors that you have mentioned. But through that, like,